Okay, back to the running back class. Who do you want to start with? I liked one guy quite a lot.
Who do you want to start with? You tell me. You want to start with the guy that you liked?
Yes. Let's start with the one guy from the list you gave me that I definitely liked. And then there's another half that I kind of liked, and then everyone else didn't love. Blake Corum from Michigan.
Okay.
He's good. Like, very good. Mm-hmm. He has the best blend of everything. I was getting like David Montgomery vibes from him. Like really good in short spaces, great vision, sets up defenders well, can glide.
Feet of Le'Veon Bell, contact balance of Barry Sanders, long speed of Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, put it all together. Yeah, just the perfect running back. But like has that combination of being able to glide or jump cut, whichever is the best thing. The one thing, and this is like David Montgomery as well, albeit he's been doing this recently, but like lacks that final gear to pull away from guys once he breaks into open space. But that's really my only like negative from him is like he probably ends up running in the the mid 4.4s, maybe a 4.5 flat, and it's like if that's your biggest criticism, I'm in.
Yeah, I like Blake Corum a lot, man. I thought about him as RB2 last year behind Bijan Robinson before he ended up getting hurt and then deciding that he was going to come back. He's the smartest running back to me in college football, and I've been really disappointed by the numbers this year. Like the yards after contact have been bad, the forced missed tackle numbers have been bad, and that's just never been a case with him throughout his career. So I'm almost kind of throwing him out the window because there's still moments in his tape where he just shows you he's very smart. He sees the field very well. It's like the superhero The Flash, where he isn't getting like faster. Everything else is slowing down around him. That's how he sees clutter and chaos in the offensive line, and he just does that so consistently well. You're right. It's just really the long speed, because I think his contact balance is excellent as well. I think he's got soft hands as a receiver. He will give you everything that he has in pass protection. He really is the total package of a running back. The biggest issue is that he is 5'8", and when I say that he is small for 5'8", the part of that matters is actually the stride length. It's not taking contact. He's 210, 215 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, this dude can bounce off contact. He can pass block pretty well for a player of his size as well. But because he is only 5'10", he has much shorter stride lengths, and that just means he covers less ground when he is putting his feet in the ground. So he is fast. He is quick. You see those legs churning at a good rate. He just doesn't cover nearly as much ground as a running back who would be 5'11", 6 foot, 6'1", whatever it is, just because the stride length is so much bigger for those guys and those athletic players. So Corum, no question about it. To me, I agree with you. The smartest back and the one who, to me, is going to be the most efficient one from this class.
It's like a rev limiter when you're that size, right?
Correct.
Like you just reach a certain point and then you bounce off the rev limiter and you can't go any faster because your little legs are like they can't, they just don't have the distance. They can't.
What was that? Can you do that again for the people at home? What was that?
That's what happens. He breaks into the open field. You get the little legs going, and then he just can't go any faster. You hit the bounce off the rev limiter.
Yeah, he'll also be older. I think that he might be 24 on draft day. He'll be 24 his rookie season. I've got to believe in the NFL. That's why I was really hoping that he would declare last year. 23 is different for a running back than saying that you're going to be 24, because like we talked about in the contract discussion,
right?
You're looking at 4 years from there. You're 28. Is he going to be fully healthy until he is 28 years old? It's tough to believe for a running back.
And even if he is,
I certainly hope.
Yeah, even if he is, we're in this landscape where like you're starting to look at the number 28 next to a running back and going, I don't know.
Right.
Even if he's been good, like even no injuries in the NFL, playing well, just that number 28 is going to have teams going, I don't know if we want to give this guy a decent contract like next time. So yeah, like it's a weird world where if you're a running back in college, you want to get out of there as fast as humanly possible. Like the idea of ever going back for any reason, to me, is kind of insane. You want into the NFL as fast as you can get into the NFL if your goal is to make the money. The other one that I kind of liked, Trey Benson, Florida State.
Yeah, there we go, baby. These were the two that I was hoping that you would actually like, because these were the top two that I had going into the season. I had Benson RB1 and I had Corum RB2.
Like it. Okay. So, yeah, he to me he's the most sort of prototypical of all the guys you gave me. Like he's got the size, the right dimensions, if you're sort of listing out those top running backs, 6 foot, 220. Right. Good, like he's got a good top gear. He finds space well at the second level. Like nothing about his game screams special to me, but it all screams pretty good.
I agree with you on basically your entire assessment there. The part that kind of worries me about Benson, especially watching him this year, last year he had a lot of plays that were, how should I say this, more replicable. Like a lot of his missed tackles forced and a lot of his big runs, you could see, and it was like, oh, he made a really nice one cut to find the open hole in the running lane between the offensive linemen. And then he hit a little stutter step or a one cut against somebody who was in the open field. And he made that person miss. And that ended up being a really great run. Or he found a great running lane. Maybe it was a cutback lane. He broke one tackle physically because he's got good contact balance. I think he's pretty dense dude muscular wise. So he stayed up and then he got a lot of yards after contact that way. Last year, he had a missed tackles force per attempt average of 0.51. Which is nuts. Bijan Robinson had a 0.44, and we thought that was crazy. Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, they've been all around the same as the highest we've seen over the last 5 years. And Benson had a 0.51. So it was crazy last year. So that's why he entered the year as my RB1, because he was dominating at those individual athletic statistics. This year, he really struggled in the early parts of the year to find any sort of open space. And even though he is playing better lately, a lot of his big runs, you'll see, you watch him, especially over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and you go, okay, that's not really replicable in the NFL. A lot of it is him going one way and then just looping the other, and the defenders taking terrible angles or just not being fast enough to catch up to him. And I go, all right, in the NFL, you easily get caught when you try to reverse field like that or something of that nature. So I still like Benson. I think he's a really talented back, but I don't think it's anywhere near threatening the first round. I think that this is probably, and I think a lot of running backs in this class are 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round types of players. So that's kind of where I'm at with Benson right now.
The thing that I thought he was best at was, I think he would make a really good, old school zone scheme running back. That classic Shanahan scheme of one cut north-south, put your foot in the ground.
And that was, you thinking that, you should even watch his 2022 stuff, because you'll say to yourself, get this guy on a zone blocking team because it's when he's at his best.
Right.
And I still believe that moving forward, but we just haven't seen nearly as much of it this year.
Yeah, and I think they run a lot of sort of power stuff with pulling blockers everywhere, and they're not clearing the lane. We watch the Michigan, there's a lot of open space running behind Michigan's offensive line, and it really contrasts with some of these other guys. Benson, they're pulling linemen everywhere, and so many of his runs are having to sort of stay patient behind multiple pulling offensive linemen and then finally finding the crease and exploding into it. So I do kind of wonder with a few of these guys actually how much is the offense just not necessarily helping them look great as running backs, whether it's the offensive line stinks and there's just no space to be had, or whether it's the scheme here is just cluttering the lane for Trey Benson to actually find the space, and he's got to wait for a while before the space materializes in the first place. I do think if you get him, and nobody's running this type of, but in a Shanahan scheme, this guy feels like he'd be amazing.
All right, we got to talk about Braelon Allen from Wisconsin.
Okay,
because we chatted a little bit pre-show.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of people out there who look at the fact that Braelon Allen had over 1,200 yards his true freshman and true sophomore seasons, and they think that he's got a chance to be RB1 in this class. You disagree.
I thought you were pranking me with Braelon Allen. I thought you'd give me a joke player that wasn't real, and you got four running backs that might be the best running back in the class, and then Braelon Allen was in there just for funsies.
Funsies.
I don't know that I've ever seen a less explosive athlete in my life.
He's hold on. Does it change your opinion if he's 6'2", 245 pounds?
No, that just explains why he's I honestly thought somebody had slowed the tape down. I genuinely, this is not a joke, not hyperbole. I genuinely checked that there wasn't a problem with the video player, and it wasn't for some reason playing at 0.8 speed or something. I've never seen a less explosive, pondering, plodding, movement profile of a running back. And okay, you say, yeah, he's 6'2", 245, but this just looks like, like lower levels where you just take a huge guy and give him the ball because he's bigger than the people that he looks like. Somebody's just given a defensive end the football and said, here you go. We're going to, we've run out of running backs. We don't have any anymore. So the defensive end is going to take the carries for the rest of the game. That's what his tape looks like.
It's a good strat in high school.
Right.
It's a really good strat in high school. No, look, I am not as low on Braelon Allen as you are, but I wasn't super jazzed on him going into the season because I agree. If you're going to be 6'2", 245 pounds, for me to really consider, you're basically either a mid-round running back or you're a first-round running back. There's not really a big in between. Like, are you a crazy athlete at that size or not? And I thought the reason why I think I ended up having Allen just outside my top 50 to start the year, and now he's a lot closer to, I think he's like in the 90s now for me. I've kind of brought him down every single time, and a lot of his numbers look better, but I watch his tape and I just don't really see anything more than a rotational power back. I really don't. And the reason why is because I think he sees the offensive line decently well. Like, I think he knows how to get beyond the chaos of his offensive line, but he gets really uncomfortable in open space. Really uncomfortable. Like, there were times, especially over the last couple of games when I was watching to just kind of refresh my mind on these guys for this podcast, there were times where he would get to the second or third level and he's got green grass in front of him, and you can physically see him looking for where the closest defender is because he wants like contact. It's like, dude, you earned the green grass in front of you. You got to keep running. And I just think he gets really uncomfortable because he knows he's not a speed back, but he doesn't even let himself believe that in the moments where he has the open space to maybe open it up and hit that top speed when he can. And if you have a running back who is uncomfortable in space, that's a tough sell because the whole idea is to get you in space, right? It is to spring you out to the sideline or get you past the second level with a pulling lead blocker so he takes up the linebacker and you got green grass to work with and it's you, and then 5 yards later it's a safety. Like, that's the goal. The goal of blocking is to get you in open space, and if you are uncomfortable with the goal, that's kind of tough. It really limits, to me, how valuable you are as back. So I still believe that Allen sees the field very well. His forced missed tackle average is up a lot this year because he is just really great at bouncing off tackles. He's a very powerful running back. But it is getting harder for me to believe that he will be a full-time back in the league, given his tendencies and how he approaches open space for those reasons.
Yeah, maybe the biggest concern that I had about his tape, like, look, he's giant, right? So those guys are not going to look as explosive as other type running backs, but you need to know your profile. And I think one of the biggest concerning things about big banks is when they don't fully appreciate what they are. So I think the thing that he does best of anything is actually he's got a really nice lateral cut and wants to bounce things into space. But you can't do that if you're 245 pounds. Like, that's not going to be your role of the NFL. You will never have a successful gig by trying to beat NFL defenses to the space on the perimeter. You're never going to get there at 245 pounds. And some people in the chat have brought up Brandon Jacobs as a comp, and it's one that occurred to me as well. Now, number one, Brandon Jacobs, I don't think people fully appreciate how huge that guy was. He was like 265 pounds, not 245 pounds. But number two, Brandon Jacobs fully understood who he was, which is the juggernaut from X-Men, right? I am going to run directly forward, put my head down, and because I'm 265 pounds, you will not be able to stop me. It's like running a truck through, just anything. Like the thing that signified Brandon Graham was torque. He is not necessarily moving that fast, but he's moving unstoppably towards you. I don't get that impression from Allen. Like, he wants to head towards the space. He doesn't necessarily want to just put his head down and run over everybody, or run into the jaws of hell and just get what's there. He seems to want to be a different type of back than he actually is. I
don't know if I'd go that far. like, I think he knows who he is, but he's not as violent with it as like a Brandon Jacobs or like someone else also brought up in the chat, like Jamal Lewis. Like, those running backs would take every carry like it was their last carry. Like, and they would go into you and go into contact like it was the last carry that they were ever going to get. And I love that quality in a running back. Tyler Algier, the reason why he was RB3 for me in the class that he was is because Algier believes that every carry that he gets is going to be his last, and he's going to give you every single ounce of energy he has. I think Allen understands who he is as a back because he's quick to give you the stiff arm. He's quick to lower the shoulder. He's good for that yards after contact. He's got more finesse in his game than you would think a player of 245 pounds would. But having a little bit of that finesse takes away from the overall violence at contact that some of those other players had. So do you believe that the finesse part of Braelon Allen's game makes him a more well-rounded running back? Because if you do, then you're going to see him in a different light, and you're going to believe he's one of the best running backs in this class. But if you believe that he is not explosive or athlete enough to have that kind of a title, to be that kind of an athletic difference maker at the next level, then instead him having a little bit more of a finesse game is simply taking away from the true area of strength that he has with his size. And like you said, like that contact, that breaking tackles, that being violent kind of a thing. So that's kind of how I would describe Braelon Allen. I'm not the biggest fan of his game. I still think there's certainly a place for him in the NFL because, again, I think he sees the offensive line pretty well. But again, the thing that lowers his ceiling for me is that when he gets into the open field, he just looks really uncomfortable, and that's not a good trait for a running back to have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like his tape. Yeah, I'm not a fan.
You are lower on him than I am, but yeah, I think that we see some of that similarly.
So 2 more running backs to talk about: Bucky Irving from Oregon, and Ray Davis from Kentucky. Let's start with Irving. I quite liked his tape. He was the guy who stood out in terms of, like, he is just trying to work his way through a much, much uglier picture at the line of scrimmage than some of these other running backs. I don't know much about Oregon's offensive line, but it didn't look good from his tape. He's a pretty small guy, but he seems very difficult to get a clean shot on. Like, people do not tend to get lined up clean hits on him. He's constantly figuring out a way to contort himself and give them a glancing blow, or they only get one leg or whatever. Like, he's able to get through a lot of contact in a way that you wouldn't expect a guy that size to be able to do. I thought he had pretty good vision. He also didn't seem to have great top gear, blazing speed. But my biggest sort of, not even a concern, but the biggest thing I sort of saw on his tape that caused me a little bit of pause was he's got a lot more hesitation to his running than somebody like Corum, where everything feels like, those bag drills that they run with running backs where they're sort of bouncing, legs chopping, and then there's bags moving left or right, and you've got to figure out what's like. Yeah, so sure. Everything's sort of, he's like waiting for everything to like unfold in front of him, and it's just sort of constant chopping, whereas Corum just goes, and then when something moves in front of him, he reacts to it and goes in a different direction. I feel
Go ahead. Sorry,
I feel like Irving is waiting. He's reactive rather than proactive with that stuff.
So if Corum's coming out of the draft 6 years, or not Corum, if Irving's coming out of the draft 6 years ago, we'd go, he's got Le'Veon Bell feet. Because that was the same with Le'Veon Bell, right? Le'Veon Bell would do that thing when he was with the Steelers where they'd handle the ball in the backfield, and it almost looks like his feet would literally stop. Like, he's just reading things and he's waiting for it, and then he would move on. And I think people were very, very obsessed with that style of running and that style of patience. And it can work sometimes if you're a really great athlete. You can put your foot in the ground and go from 0 to 60 very quickly. But if not, you got to keep moving forward, definitely. I don't really see that as much of a detractor with his game. I like Bucky Irving a lot. And funny thing about Irving and where he is at Oregon. So Trey Benson was actually at Oregon before he was at Florida State. And he transferred from Oregon to Florida State and played very, very well. And Oregon fans probably would have been pretty upset that Benson was going off at Florida State and that he wasn't doing that at Oregon. However, Bucky Irving was at Minnesota his freshman year and transferred over to Oregon. So they went from Trey Benson at Oregon to Bucky Irving at Oregon. And so it was pretty decent trade-off because Irving's playing really well. I like him a lot, man. There are some people out there who have thrown out the Alvin Kamara comp because of some size and some running similarities with Bucky Irving. I don't quite see that. Kamara was more explosive to me. Kamara just seemed more... Well, I guess both of them are really good at bouncing off tackles and their contact balance. So I guess I won't even mention that. But I thought Kamara was more explosive. I thought Kamara was a little bit more of a one-cut player as a receiver. And I also think that Kamara was just straight up bigger. Like, I think he was an inch or two taller, and Kamara was like 210 at the combine, and Bucky Irving's like 190, 195. So I don't fully agree with that one, but stylistically, I think the contact balance is the biggest attribute that Irving brings to the table that he's been very good at this year. He has been somebody who you cannot just lower a shoulder into this guy. His core strength is too good. His balance is too good. He will not only bounce off of it, but he will keep his feet moving, and he will immediately continue to go north and south on you. So that's why you see a lot of really good numbers from him when it comes to missed tackles forced per average. When you see yards after contact per attempt, like a lot of that stuff is up for Irving. And those are the kind of backs that I really like. So not RB1 in this class, but somebody who I think has definitely risen up and is a really good football player.
Yeah, I liked him. He was like the third guy on my list. So I
figured.
Corum number 1, Benson 2, Bucky Irving was 3. All right, Ray Davis from Kentucky. He was interesting because, so there's a few things. Number 1, the more I watched, the less I liked. Like, I was initially quite high on him, and then the more I watched, the more concerns I had. But also, I think okay, so the thing that I don't like about him is I think his vision is not great. He seems a tick slow to like read blocks developing, but in a strange way, I think he gets like dazzled by space, right? So he sort of sees space and heads to space without actually sort of looking at how the blocking dynamics are and how the space is either opening or closing based off the leverage of linemen and all that kind of thing, right? And ironically, that plays really well at the second level. So once he gets through the trash, if he's into the second level, that dude is probably the best guy in this group that you've shown me, because heading to space is the name of the game, right? If you're able to find the space at the second level, you're gone. And there's a bunch of plays where he ends up with a touchdown when I think some other guys wouldn't have made the cut he made at the second level. But it doesn't play as well at the line of scrimmage. And there's a bunch of plays where I think he gets stuffed, where if he'd actually had a better understanding of how the blocking was developing, he would have gotten an awful lot more yardage. And I was kind of thinking that, like, he will be better the better the blocking in front of him is. Mm-hmm. So, like, he's like a force multiplier for a good offensive line. If you have a good offensive line that's getting movement at the line of scrimmage, that dude might look amazing. But if you don't have that, he wouldn't be the running back that I would want behind it.
Yeah. I don't know if I see it as negatively as you do when it comes to his vision. I actually think his vision is pretty good. I just think that no matter what, Davis is going to be, at this point, he's just going to be like a mid-round pick. Like, I think he's probably going to be an early day 3 type of a player, because not only is this kind of his only like major big-time breakout year, but he was at Temple for 2 years to start his collegiate career. Then he was at Vanderbilt for 2 years. And now he's at Kentucky for 1 year. So I think he's going to be one of the older prospects that we have in this class anyways, which aged for running back, not great. He's got really good numbers against some SEC teams. Steve Palazzolo, this podcast's very own, was in the house when he ran for 280 yards against our Florida Gators, which was not fun. But it was obviously great for Davis, and it really kind of put him on the map and showed that he's got some really nice all-around ability. And I think that that's what I believe with him. To me, he's not going to be like this guy who competes for an RB1 spot super early. But I do think because of his determined running style, and I think he's good at a lot of things. I'm not sure he's like great at a bunch of things, but to me, I think that he could be a really nice committee back. And I mean, he's got an incredible story of adversity. I mean, he was in and out of foster care growing up. He was homeless at one point growing up. He only played football just because I think that one of his friends that he went to school with, their parents, like really like helped him out. Like, and he talked about how like, well, like I went to school and I made things happen just because like I wanted to play sports. Like that was my motivation. He's like, I wanted to get to high school because I wanted to play high school football. Like that was my goal in life. That was what I wanted to do. And then that eventually led him to get a spot to become a collegiate athlete. And it's just, he's got an incredible story of adversity from where he has come from. And I think NFL teams are absolutely going to love it. So with what he has been able to do this year in the SEC, even with him being a little bit of an older prospect, I think some NFL team's gonna make this guy an early-ish day 3 pick. And I think that he'll get a spot to compete for touches even early on in his career.
Yeah, I think he's physically talented. Like, the contrast I would make is, like, I don't know that there's a better running back in the NFL than Christian McCaffrey at working with his blocking, right? Setting up blocks, helping blocks by the way he moves and kind of, resetting leverages and just sort of working in tandem with the blocking unit, right? Davis feels like he operates in isolation from the blocking. Like, he is trying to find space and make plays himself without understanding how he can, like, fit into that picture and sort of manipulate the blocking the way a Christian McCaffrey does or that kind of thing. Like, that's where I feel like he is lacking relative to some of these other guys.